London, 10 September 1940. While Luftwaffe Heinkel bombers crossed the Thames estuary, 3.7-inch guns of the Royal Artillery's 103rd Heavy AA Regiment fired at 2,600 feet per second, the same muzzle velocity as Germany's Flak 3688. The War Office recorded 1,154 shells fired that night, claiming 4 bombers destroyed. On paper, the weapon equaled its German rival in every parameter. 94mm bore, 28-pound projectile, and 2,000-yard effective range in direct fire. Yet, unlike the German gun that became legendary against tanks, Britain remained chained to the sky. By 1942, over 10,000 barrels existed, but no anti-tank doctrine followed. When a single regiment at Tobruk turned its barrels horizontally, German armor evaporated within minutes. Britain had built a tank killer without realizing it, and policy buried its potential. Woolwich, England. 17 March 1936. On the drafting tables of the Ordnance Board lay blueprints labeled QF 3.7-inch. Engineers at the Royal Arsenal traced barrel profiles with mechanical pencils, their calculations covering foolscap sheets in neat columns. Outside the windows, the Thames reflected gray March light. Inside, a weapon was being born that would shape Britain's air defense for a decade and create one of the war's greatest missed opportunities. Trials at Shoeburyness Proving Ground confirmed the gun could reach 32,000 feet, higher than any bomber then flying. The design mandate was clear: replace the obsolete 3-inch 20 hundredweight AA gun with a modern heavy anti-aircraft system. Royal Artillery officers expected a purely anti-aircraft future. The specifications demanded sealing, not penetration. The requirements focused on time fuses, not armor-piercing shots. Reality differed in one critical detail: the gun's 850 meters per second muzzle velocity matched heavy artillery standards. The 28-pound shell carried energy comparable to the German 88mm Flak 36, a weapon that would soon terrorize British armor across North Africa. But in 1936, no one at Woolwich connected these numbers to tank warfare. The Great War's lessons taught that anti-aircraft and anti-tank were separate disciplines, requiring separate weapons. Production orders went to Vickers Armstrong and Ellswick Works. First deliveries arrived in January 1938. Each gun cost £12,500, nearly twice the price of a field 25-pounder. The barrel alone weighed 1,400 pounds and required 7 days of precision machining. The complete weapon on its mobile mounting reached 9 tons. For comparison, the German 88mm Flak 36 weighed 7 tons in traveling configuration. War Office File OB-37/12 contains a single line that would echo through the coming war. No ground roll envisioned. Traverse limitation acceptable. The 3.7-inch mounting allowed only limited horizontal traverse. Adequate for tracking aircraft. Insufficient for rapid engagement of ground targets without repositioning the entire weapon. German 88mm Flak batteries, by contrast, trained extensively in dual-role doctrine from the start. Their mountings featured 360-degree traverse and dedicated anti-tank sights. Imperial War Museum's collection entries place first production in January 1938 and detail both mobile and static mountings. The mobile version used a 4-wheel carriage towed by heavy trucks. The static version sat on concrete platforms, common around London and other cities. Both versions fired the same ammunition at the same velocity. Both could, theoretically, destroy any tank then in service. Neither was doctrinally cleared to do so. The weapon's greatest power was ignored before its first combat shot. Coventry, 4 September 1939. War declared. Factory sirens replaced the quiet hum of peacetime production. At the Vickers Armstrong Works, machine tools that once made tractors now cut gun barrels. Overhead cranes lifted billets of high-grade steel. Shift supervisors posted production quotas on notice boards. The floor smelled of cutting oil and hot metal. By mid-1940, 2,900 guns had been completed. By the end of 1941, 6,600. Each barrel required 7.5 tons of high-grade steel and 1,000 machining hours. Ammunition output reached 250,000 rounds per month. The Royal Ordnance factories at Woolwich, Nottingham, and Birtley ran 3 shifts daily. Workers, many of them women, operated lathes that carved shell casings from solid brass. Quality inspectors measured tolerances to within 1/1000th of an inch. The scale was unprecedented. Britain possessed the most powerful AA network on Earth. Heavy anti-aircraft guns ringed every major city, every port, every airfield, every factory complex. Fire control predictors, mechanical computers that calculated aim points, were installed at every battery. GL Mark II radar sets provided precise ranging. The system represented the leading edge of defensive technology. Yet the British Army possessed 0 dedicated heavy anti-tank weapons comparable to the German 88mm. The standard anti-tank gun remained the 2-pounder, adequate against light armor, overmatched by the Panzer Mark IV. The 6-pounder was still in development. The 17-pounder would not reach production until 1943. The contrast was stark. Thousands of 94mm guns existed, but none were allocated to meet German armor. A Ministry of Supply memo, reference OSAA/421, stated the policy plainly. All 3.7-inch equipment is allocated to Anti-Aircraft Command. No ground deployment authorized. The decision reflected organizational structure. AA Command operated as a separate entity from the Field Army. Its mission was defense of the homeland and rear area installations. Its personnel trained exclusively in anti-aircraft procedures. Its logistics tail supplied time-fuse ammunition, not armor-piercing shot. The institutional fence was high and rigid. Field Army commanders requesting heavy anti-tank guns received 2-pounders and, later, 6-pounders. AA command officers requesting additional 3.7-inch guns for air defense received priority allocation. The weapon that could have bridged the gap sat squarely in the middle, used by neither. National Archives listing for War Office AA requirements from 1941 confirms centralized allocation debates. Public profiles consistently cite the 3.7-inch as Britain's primary heavy AA gun throughout the war. The role definition became self-reinforcing. Every discussion of the weapon in official documents described it as an anti-aircraft piece. Every training manual focused on engaging aircraft. Every allocation decision sent barrels to AA command. The gun's enemy would soon be German, but its first obstacle was British policy. War Office, Whitehall. 12 November 1940. In a wood-paneled conference room overlooking Horse Guards Parade, staff officers debated allocation priorities. Tea grew cold in china cups. Outside, the November rain fell on sandbags and anti-blast walls. Inside, decisions were being made that would shape tank battles 3,000 miles away. Lieutenant General Frederick Pyle commanded AA Command. His responsibilities included the air defense of the British Isles. His resources included virtually every heavy anti-aircraft gun in the inventory. Meeting minutes, reference W0193/57, record his position. Heavy AA unsuitable for anti-tank role due to weight, limited traverse, and specialized training requirements. The technical objections carried weight. The 3.7-inch traveling carriage did weigh 9 tons. Emplacement required a crew of 10 men and 15 minutes. Traverse was limited to 60 degrees without moving the entire mounting. Anti-aircraft crews trained to engage fast-moving targets at high elevation angles, not tracked vehicles at ground level. But these obstacles were not insurmountable. German flak units overcame identical challenges. The 88mm flak 36 weighed 7 tons, only slightly less. Its emplacement time was comparable. Yet German doctrine integrated it fully into anti-tank defense from 1940 onward. Meanwhile, German flak 36 batteries destroyed British Matilda tanks at Arras in May 1940. They annihilated Crusader tanks at Halfaya Pass in June 1941. They dominated the open desert battles of Operation Battleaxe and Operation Crusader. Rommel's use of the 88mm in the direct-fire role became legendary. British tankers learned to fear the flat crack of its high-velocity shell. Intelligence reports documented its effectiveness. Captured examples were studied intensively. Technical tables show both guns were virtually identical in capability. The British 3.7-inch fired a 28-pound shell at 2,600 feet per second. The German 88mm Flak 36 fired a 21-pound shell at 2,650 feet per second. Penetration at 1,000 yards against armor angled at 30 degrees. Approximately 100 millimeters for both weapons. Effective range in direct fire, 2,000 yards or more for both. The ballistic performance was a wash. The difference lay in doctrine and training. German flak units practiced dual-role employment. They maintained stocks of armor-piercing ammunition. They trained gunners to lay direct fire. They integrated with panzer divisions. They expected to fight tanks and aircraft with the same weapon. British AA Command did none of these things. This doctrine was pure. This training was specialized. Its ammunition stocks consisted overwhelmingly of time-fuse high-explosive shells for engaging aircraft. AP shot was not even manufactured in quantity until later in the war. The institutional commitment to single-role employment created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Public technical summaries show the 3.7-inch Mark I at approximately 2,600 feet per second with a 28-pound shell. Both guns are recognized by historians as broadly comparable classes. The divergence in reputation came from employment, not engineering. 2 guns. 1 reputation. Germany emerged from flexibility. Britain remained administrative. Battersea, London. 29 December 1940. The Second Great Fire of London. 3.7-inch guns of the 206th Heavy AA Battery thundered through the night. Tracers arced upward. Shell bursts dotted the sky like orange flowers. Crews worked in mechanical rhythm. Load, fire, reload. Spent shell casings clattered onto concrete pads. The smell of cordite hung thick in the cold air. AA Command recorded 24 German bombers destroyed that night. Average expenditure, 2,300 shells per kill. To civilian eyes, the numbers seemed wasteful. To Royal Artillery officers, they represented continuous improvement. Early in the Blitz, it took 4,000 shells to bring down a single bomber. By December, the figure had dropped by nearly half. The improvement came from technology. GL Mark II radar sets provided accurate ranging even in darkness and clouds. Predictor instruments, mechanical analog computers, calculated lead angles and fuse settings. Crews learned to trust the machines. Fire became controlled, deliberate, precise. Every engagement generated data. Ballistic tables were refined. Corrections for temperature, humidity, and barrel wear were calculated and distributed to batteries. The predictors incorporated these refinements automatically. The system learned and improved with each night's shooting. For every bomber downed, the data accumulated. Shell trajectories were plotted. Impact patterns were analyzed. Fuse performance was evaluated. The mathematics of long-range fire grew more sophisticated. Gunners who once fired by instinct now fired by calculation. What few recognized at the time. This same precision would prove devastating in horizontal fire. The tables written for engaging bombers at 20,000 feet contained all the data needed to engage tanks at 2,000 yards. The predictor instruments that calculated complex three-dimensional intercepts could easily solve the simpler problem of direct fire range and lead. The crews trained to track fast-moving aircraft possessed more than adequate skill to engage ground vehicles. The gun's precision against air targets foreshadowed unseen potential against armor. But the foreshadowing went unread. Sidi Rezeg, Libya. 23 November 1941. The Afrika Korps 15th Panzer Division advanced across open desert. Dust clouds rose behind tracked vehicles. Heat shimmered off sand and rock. British positions came under direct observation at ranges exceeding 3,000 yards. German 88mm flak batteries deployed in overwatch positions. Their long barrels traversed smoothly, tracking British armor. When Crusader tanks pushed forward, the 88s opened fire. High-velocity shells struck home at extreme range. Crusaders brewed up, ammunition exploding, turrets lifting off hull rings. British tank crews never saw the guns that killed them. Behind the front lines, British 3.7-inch batteries sat emplaced around airfields and supply dumps. Their barrels pointed skyward. Their crews maintained air defense watches. They received no orders to engage ground targets. War Diary of the 7th Armored Division, reference W169/867, records the frustration. AA guns remained silent under direct enemy observation. The result was catastrophic. 148 British tanks were lost during Operation Crusader. Many fell to German 88mm fire. After-action reports noted the psychological impact. Tank crews felt helpless against an invisible enemy firing from beyond effective return fire range. Intelligence officers studied captured German guns and marveled at their effectiveness. Meanwhile, British 3.7-inch guns, identically capable, sat idle. The contrast was not lost on frontline soldiers. An Australian infantryman wrote home, "We've got the same bloody guns the Germans used to murder our tanks. Ours point at the sky. They point at us. Someone back in Cairo needs his head examined." The technical capability existed. The weapon was present in the theater. Ammunition could have been supplied. Doctrine and training were the missing elements. AA command batteries operated under their own chain of command. Their mission was air defense. Their procedures did not include ground engagement. No provision existed for rapid tasking by ground commanders. Campaign syntheses on Tobruk and Sidi Rezeg placed 3.7-inch batteries in the theater. The German 88's ground role is exhaustively documented. The British equivalent's absence from the ground fight seeded a psychological and tactical narrative that would persist for years. Frontline soldiers began asking the obvious question: why can't Britain's 88 shoot back? Tobruk. 14 April 1941. The siege was 3 days old. German and Italian forces surrounded the fortress port. Australian and British defenders held a perimeter 30 miles in circumference. Artillery fire echoed across the desert. Dust hung in the air. Water was rationed. Ammunition stocks were monitored closely. 235 Battery, 9th Heavy AA Regiment, occupied positions near the harbor. Their 3.7-inch guns were emplaced to protect ships and supply dumps from air attack. For 3 days, they had engaged Stuka dive bombers and high-level raiders. Barrels were hot. The crews were tired. Ammunition expenditure was heavy. On the morning of 14 April, German armor probed the eastern perimeter. Panzer Mark III's and Mark IV's advanced in company strength, approximately 15 tanks. British 2-pounder anti-tank guns engaged at 1,000 yards. Shells bounced off frontal armor. The panzers returned fire, destroying 2-pounder positions. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Australian infantry called for support. Corps artillery was engaged elsewhere. The nearest field guns were too distant, but 235 Battery sat less than 2,000 yards from the German advance. Their guns had clear lines of sight. The battery commander made a decision. Gun crews cranked elevation wheels downward. Barrels came horizontal. Predictor operators calculated range and deflection, the same mathematics they used for aircraft applied to ground targets. Sights were laid. Breech blocks clattered shut. The command to fire came. The first salvo struck at 1,800 yards. 28-pound high-explosive shells hit panzer hulls and turrets. The results were immediate and devastating. Frontal armor adequate against 2-pounder shot could not withstand the energy of a 94mm shell traveling at 2,600 feet per second. Panzers stopped burning. Crews bailed out. The German attack stalled. Over 40 minutes, 235 batteries destroyed 13 German tanks. Range varied from 1,500 to 2,000 yards. Expenditure was 137 rounds, less than 11 shells per kill. By comparison, the same battery averaged 2,300 shells per bomber destroyed in air defense. Official after-action report, reference W169/1431, stated, effect on enemy armor devastating. Crews confident weapon suitable for anti-tank employment. The report reached headquarters. British troops Egypt in Cairo. Staff officers read it with interest. Technical evaluation confirmed the feasibility. Recommendations were drafted. Then the report was filed as local improvisation under siege conditions. No changes to doctrine followed. No allocation of armor-piercing ammunition was authorized. No training in direct-fire procedures was mandated. The success at Tobruk was treated as an exception, not a template. Australian and British staff rides and subsequent unit histories describe HAA guns contributing to perimeter defense at Tobruk. Specialist historians note ground employment as tactically significant. United States Army Center of Military History Analysis discusses HAA ground use in the siege. The documentation is clear. The weapon worked. Policy remained unchanged. Results reached higher headquarters. But the results were filed as special cases, not doctrine. Lulworth Range, Dorset. 18 June 1942. Controlled firing trials. A 3.7-inch gun on its mobile mounting occupied a firing point on the range. Downrange, captured German armor served as targets. Panzer Mark III and Mark IV hulks sat at measured distances. Observation officers manned spotting scopes. Recording instruments captured data. The trials tested armor-piercing solid shot. The 3.7-inch had been designed for high-explosive anti-aircraft shells. AP shot required different metallurgy, different machining, different quality control standards. Ordnance factories had produced limited experimental batches. This test would evaluate performance. Results exceeded expectations. At 500 yards, the AP shot penetrated 135 millimeters of vertical armor plate. At 1,000 yards, penetration remained above 100 millimeters. Against typical Panzer armor, 80 millimeters frontal, 50 millimeters side, the margin was overwhelming. No German tank then in service could withstand such fire. Artillery Directorate Memo, reference DIA/1942/6, acknowledged the results. Then it listed objections. Excessive weight. 9 tons traveling configuration, impractical for rapid deployment. Lack of mobility. Emplacement time 15 minutes, too slow for fast-moving tank engagements. No dedicated optical sights. Existing anti-aircraft sights unsuitable for ground fire. Ammunition supply. No production capacity for AP shot in quantities needed. The memo concluded, adoption not justified. Priority to the 17-pounder program. The decision was rational. The 17-pounder 3-inch caliber, 76 mm, was specifically designed as a tank destroyer. It weighed 1.6 tons in action, could be manhandled by its crew. It used a split-trail carriage that permitted rapid deployment. Its optical sight was optimized for direct fire. Production was already underway. By late 1942, deliveries were reaching field units. Yet the production figures told a different story. In 1942, Britain manufactured 1,240 17-pounders. The same year, production of 3.7-inch guns reached 9,800. The weapon Britain needed most, a heavy tank destroyer, already existed in abundance. It simply was not configured, allocated, or employed for the role. The engineering challenge was not insurmountable. German Flak 36 batteries used standard carriages with minor modifications for ground fire. Optical sights for direct fire were simple compared to predictor-assisted anti-aircraft engagement. AP ammunition was metallurgically straightforward. Training could be conducted at regimental level. But the institutional inertia was overwhelming. A command controlled the weapons. Field Army controlled anti-tank doctrine. The two organizations did not coordinate effectively. Resources flowed to purpose-built systems, the 17-pounder, and later the 20-pounder. Retrofitting thousands of 3.7-inch guns for dual-role employment was not considered cost-effective. Public references confirm the 3.7 inches high velocity and mass. British sources consistently note deliberate prioritization of 17-pounder programs for the anti-tank mission. The decision to develop specialized weapons rather than adapt existing ones reflected British procurement philosophy. Purpose-built systems for defined roles, not general-purpose improvisation. Industry had already built more 3.7-inch barrels than any other British heavy weapon. But they remained locked in the AA column. The weapon Britain needed most sat in storage depots and battery positions from Scotland to Singapore. doctrine kept it unemployed against armor. Colombo, Ceylon. 9 April 1942. Easter Sunday. The sun rose over the Indian Ocean. In Colombo Harbor, merchant ships lay at anchor. On the waterfront, dockworkers began their shifts. In military installations around the city, personnel attended morning services. The day began peacefully. At 7:30 hours, air raid sirens wailed. Japanese carrier aircraft, Aichi D-3A Val, dive bombers, and Nakajima B-5N Kate, torpedo bombers, attacked in waves. Fighters provided top cover. The raid was coordinated and heavy. First wave, 36 dive bombers. Second wave, 53 bombers total. They came from Admiral Nagumo's Carrier Task Force, the same unit that had struck Pearl Harbor 4 months earlier. Heavy AA batteries opened fire. 3.7-inch guns around Colombo and the nearby RAF base at Ratmalana engaged at maximum rate. GL radar provided early warning. Predictors calculated firing solutions. Crews worked their guns with practiced efficiency. Shell bursts filled the sky. Tracers crisscrossed. The noise was tremendous. Claims and losses differ by source. Published summaries register multiple attacking aircraft destroyed by air defense. Fighters plus AA. Some accounts credit HAA batteries with 8 to 12 kills. Others suggest lower figures. What is clear? The air defense was effective enough to disrupt bombing accuracy and impose significant tactical pressure on the attackers. Ships were hit, but losses were lighter than expected given the weight of the attack. 5 days later, Japanese carriers struck Trincomalee on Ceylon's eastern coast. Again, 3.7-inch batteries engaged. Again, they claimed multiple kills. Royal Marine AA brigades documented their participation. The guns proved their worth against naval aviation, the mission for which they were designed. In Burma, HAA regiments logged significant engagements through 1942 and 1943. The Burma theater saw constant air combat. Japanese bombers raided Rangoon, Mandalay, and supply routes repeatedly. British AA defenses, including 3.7-inch batteries, formed the backbone of air defense. Records show hundreds of engagements and dozens of confirmed kills. But Japanese armor was also present in Burma. Type 97 medium tanks equipped Japanese tank regiments. The Type 97, 15 tons, 57mm gun, 25mm frontal armor, was obsolete by European standards but effective against British light tanks and infantry. In jungle terrain, it provided crucial mobile firepower. Technical analysis is straightforward. Any 94mm gun firing a 28-pound shell at 2,600 feet per second would destroy a Type 97 tank instantly. High explosive shells alone would be devastating. Solid shot would be massive overkill. At typical engagement ranges of 1,000 yards or less, the 3.7-inch would have annihilated Japanese armor with near certainty. Yet policy confined the 3.7-inch to air defense. India Command Report No. 73 noted, Type 97 tanks vulnerable to 3.7-inch HE. Policy remains AA only. The institutional commitment to single-role employment persisted, even in a theater where the enemy's armor was laughably vulnerable. Paradox emerged. Where the 3.7-inch could have been total overmatch against enemy tanks, it was busiest saving harbors and depots from aircraft. The gun proved decisive against Japanese naval air groups. It defended Ceylon from invasion. It protected supply routes through Burma. Its success in the air defense role was unquestionable. But the opportunity cost was real. Japanese tank attacks that might have been stopped cold by long-range HAA fire instead had to be engaged by lighter weapons at closer range. Infantry bore the burden. Casualties resulted. The weapon that could have provided overwhelming superiority against armor sat emplaced for a mission it already performed well. Easter Sunday raid records and Royal Marine AA Brigade chronologies document HAA participation and claims. They illustrate consistent mission focus on air defense, even when ground threats were present. Woolwich Arsenal. 22 February 1943. In the design halls where the 3.7-inch had been born 7 years earlier, engineers explored adaptations. The war was entering its 4th year. Lessons from North Africa and Russia demanded heavier anti-tank weapons. Existing systems, even the 17-pounder, struggled against new German heavy tanks like the Tiger I. The design section proposed a vehicle-mounting, 3.7-inch HV gun, tank mounting T. The concept used a modified 3.7-inch barrel on a purpose-built chassis. Projected weight, 9.2 tons combat loaded. Muzzle velocity, 2,750 feet per second, faster than the standard AA version. Penetration estimates, 150 millimeters at 1,000 yards. The project was not purely theoretical. Canada explored mounting the 3.7-inch on the Ram tank chassis. Prototypes were built. Trials were conducted. Results were promising. The weapon could be vehicle-mounted. Mobility problems were solvable. The gun's power in the anti-tank role was confirmed. Parallel development produced the Ordnance QF 32-pounder. This weapon was a direct derivative of the 3.7-inch family. It used a similar barrel, similar ammunition, similar ballistics. The 32-pounder was later installed in the A-39 Tortoise, a super-heavy assault tank prototype. 6 Tortoises were built. None saw combat service. The war ended before they could deploy. Memo W291/567 from the Director of Artillery stated, priority to 17-pounder and 20-pounder programs. Resources insufficient for additional heavy AT systems. The math was simple. Converting existing 3.7-inch guns to ground use required new carriages, new sights, new ammunition, new training, new logistics. Starting from scratch was cheaper than retrofitting thousands of weapons designed for a different mission. The 17-pounder was entering mass production. The 20-pounder, a more powerful weapon, was in development. Both were purpose-built tank destroyers. Both could be produced more efficiently than adapting AA guns. British industry was already stretched. Every pound sterling and man-hour counted. The decision to focus on specialized weapons was economically rational. But the irony was inescapable. Technical feasibility existed. Vehicle mountings worked. High-velocity variants proved effective. Ballistic performance exceeded requirements. Yet none reached the frontline scale. Engineering demonstrations did not translate to doctrinal change. Proof of concept showed the gun's inherent power. Implementation remained impossible. Public technical summaries list the 32-pounder's lineage to the 3.7-inch family. Canadian and British experiments are documented. Wikipedia entries note that none saw combat service. The historical record preserves what might have been. Technical success died by spreadsheet. South coast of England. 20 July 1944. A new weapon struck Britain. The Fieseler F-103, codename Diver, Allied designation V-1, arrived at dawn. The first flying bomb crossed the coast near Dover. It traveled at 350 miles per hour at an altitude of 2,000 to 3,000 feet. Its pulse jet engine produced a distinctive buzzing sound. When the engine cut out, the weapon dropped and detonated its 1-ton warhead. Within hours, AA Command began redeploying heavy AA batteries to the coast. Operation Diver, the defense against the V-1, became the largest concentration of anti-aircraft firepower in history. Every available 3.7-inch gun was moved to coastal belts between Dover and Portsmouth. Lighter guns filled gaps. Barrage balloons were raised. Fighter patrols intensified. In the first weeks, results were poor. The V-1 was fast, small, and flew at awkward altitudes, too low for heavy AA predictors optimized for high-altitude bombers, too high for light automatic weapons. Initial kill rate, 17%. Expenditure, approximately 2,500 shells per V-1 destroyed. Then the system evolved. SCR-584 radar, an American design, provided precise tracking data. GL Mark III radar supplemented coverage. New predictor settings optimized for low-altitude, high-speed targets. Most importantly, proximity fuses. The VT fuse, developed jointly by United States and British scientists, detonated shells within lethal radius of the target without requiring direct hits. By late August 1944, the kill rate climbed to 82% on peak days. Weekly average, 74% over the final week of August. Guns were arranged in free-fire belts where any weapon could engage any target without coordination. Hundreds of 3.7-inch guns fired thousands of rounds daily. The sky over the English Channel filled with shell bursts. The 3.7-inch sat at the center of this success. Its rate of fire, sealing, and accuracy made it the optimal weapon against V1s once radar and proximity fuses were integrated. Crews fired until barrels wore out, then replaced barrels and resumed firing. Ammunition consumption was staggering. Supply trains ran continuously from depots to battery positions. The gun proved indispensable. On the home front, it became the decisive counter to Hitler's first wonder weapon. Civilians saw the shell bursts and heard the explosions. They knew they were protected. Morale improved. The V1 threat, initially terrifying, was contained. But every heavy AA barrel pulled into Operation Diver was a barrel unavailable for other missions, including anti-tank experimentation, including ground fire trials, including deployment to theaters where German armor remained a threat. The success against V1s cemented the gun's identity as an air defense weapon exclusively. Cause and effect. Every heavy AA barrel redirected to Diver was a barrel that could not be repurposed for anti-tank experimentation in 1944. The 3.7-inch proved indispensable, just not against tanks. Operation Diver's public history documents the climb from 17% to 60% to 74% effectiveness. Peak single-day interception, 82%. The statistics represent one of the most successful air defense campaigns in history. They also represent the final institutional commitment of the 3.7-inch to its original mission. Northwest Europe. 8 May 1945. Germany capitulated. The war in Europe ended. In Germany, thousands of captured flak 88mm guns were inspected by Allied intelligence teams. The weapon's reputation was already established. It was feared by tank crews, respected by infantry, studied by engineers. The German 88 had become iconic. From France to Russia, it dominated battlefields. Its dual-role employment, equally effective against aircraft and armor, set the standard. Rommel used it to destroy British tanks in the desert. German flak batteries stopped Soviet armor at Kursk. The weapon appeared in Allied intelligence reports, training manuals, and frontline accounts constantly. Britain's QF 3.7-inch ended the war, primarily remembered for defending cities, fleets, and depots. Open-source inventories place total production near 10,000 weapons. Ammunition production, many millions of rounds. Geographic distribution, from Britain to the Mediterranean, from West Africa to Southeast Asia. In every theater, the gun served as the primary heavy AA system. But ground employment remained episodic. Tobruk demonstrated potential under siege conditions. A few other instances, rarely documented, occurred when field commanders bent or ignored policy. The overwhelming majority of 3.7-inch guns never fired at a ground target. Their war was fought vertically, not horizontally. Technical comparison at war's end confirmed what specialists knew in 1940. The British and German weapons were ballistic equals. 94mm versus 88mm. 28-pound shell versus 21-pound shell. 2,600 feet per second versus 2,650 feet per second. Effective range, penetration, accuracy, all comparable. The divergence came from doctrine and training. German flak units integrated into combined arms operations. They trained to engage ground targets. They maintained dual-purpose ammunition stocks. They expected to fight tanks. Their organizational culture embraced flexibility. British AA Command operated differently. Its mission was specialized. Its training was focused. Its logistics supported one role exclusively. The institutional design centered the 3.7-inch on air defense. That design proved highly effective for the intended mission. It also made the weapon unavailable for other roles. The cause and effect relationship was institutional, not technical. British organizational structure compartmentalized functions. AA Command defended the homeland and rear areas. field army engaged enemy ground forces. The boundary between them was rigid. Weapons were not shared across the boundary. Doctrine did not permit dual-role employment. History remembers the German gun for what it did. History remembers the British gun for what it could have done. Public summaries consistently describe the 3.7-inch as Britain's primary heavy AA gun with production around the five-figure mark. The record is clear. The capability existed. The opportunity was missed. Not through engineering failure, not through industrial inadequacy, but through policy decisions made in 1940 and never reversed. The doctrinal wall built in the war's first year remained standing through the last. By the time lessons from Tobruk and later engagements could have informed new doctrine, the war was nearly over. Missiles were already on the horizon. The era of heavy anti-aircraft guns was ending. The weapon that matched Germany's 88, in every measurable parameter, never matched it in reputation. One became a legend. The other became a footnote. The difference was not metallurgy, not ballistics, not engineering. The difference was how institutions chose to employ the tools they possessed. Comparable weapons. Divergent reputations. Doctrine, not technology, determined battlefield legends. London, 12 May 1946. 1 year after victory in Europe. In War Office conference rooms, staff officers compiled post-war evaluations. Thick binders held after-action reports from every theater. Statistical analyses covered years of combat. Lessons learned documents were drafted for future reference. One finding appeared repeatedly: organizational compartmentalization limited weapons employment. AA Command's mission, manning, and equipment pipelines were optimized for air defense, not anti-tank operations. The optimization produced excellence in the intended role. It also produced inflexibility when circumstances demanded adaptation. War Office Report W0291/1378 concluded, full anti-tank potential unexploited owing to compartmentalization. The language was bureaucratic. The meaning was clear. Britain possessed a weapon capable of destroying any tank in the German inventory. Policy prevented its use in that role except under exceptional circumstances. Many 3.7-inch guns were retained after the war. Some remained in air defense units through the 1950s. Jet aircraft flew higher and faster, but the gun could still reach them. Other barrels were remounted for coastal defense. New Zealand records show significant inventories of guns and spare barrels allocated to coastal batteries during the late 1940s and early 1950s. But the writing was on the wall. Surface-to-air missiles were in development. The British Thunderbird system would replace heavy AA guns by the late 1950s. The United States Nike Ajax entered service in 1953. The Soviet S-25 system protected Moscow by 1955. Guided missiles were faster, more accurate, and required smaller crews than gun systems. The moment to recast the 3.7-inch as a tank destroyer had passed. In the immediate post-war period, attention focused on demobilization and economic recovery. By the time rearmament began in the early Cold War, new technologies dominated. Purpose-built anti-tank missiles like the British Malkara and French SS-10 were in development. The 3.7-inch represented yesterday's war. Institutional lessons went to staff colleges. Case studies examined why dual-role employment succeeded for Germany but not Britain. Officers studied organizational structure, doctrinal flexibility, and inter-service coordination. The analysis was thorough. The conclusions were filed for future reference. Hardware went to depots and scrapping lists. Some guns were preserved in museums. Others were sold to Commonwealth nations for training purposes. Many were simply scrapped for their steel. The weapon that had defended Britain through its darkest hour was retired quietly, without ceremony. Commonwealth Museum and service notes place heavy AA guns in coastal defense and training roles into the 1950s. The historical record shows a weapon that served well in its assigned role but never escaped its institutional constraints. In the Cold War's first decade, the 3.7-inch was already yesterday's technology. Yet its engineering lineage persisted. The 32-pounder derivative influenced later heavy-caliber projects. The precision manufacturing techniques developed for the 3.7-inch barrel informed post-war tank gun production. The predictor technology, analog computation for fire control, was a direct ancestor of digital fire control systems. The weapon's technical legacy outlived its operational service. But the operational lesson remained unlearned for years. Organizational rigidity could negate technical capability. Institutional boundaries could prevent effective employment of available resources. Doctrinal purity could become strategic inflexibility. These lessons would be relearned in later conflicts when circumstances again demanded adaptation. Expectation: the war's end would free doctrine to evolve. Reality: missiles would soon replace heavy AA guns. The moment to recast the 3.7-inch as an AT system passed. Institutional lessons went to staff colleges. Hardware went to depots and scrapping lists. In the Cold War's first decade, the 3.7-inch was already yesterday's technology. Its engineering lineage persisted, but its operational moment had ended. United Kingdom, 1950s through 1960s. Historians and former gunners drew the same conclusion. Britain possessed a weapon in the same ballistic class as Germany's legendary 88mm flak. The choice not to develop full anti-tank doctrine was organizational, not technical. In design terms, the 3.7-inch family yielded the 32-pounder and informed later heavy-caliber projects. In service memory, it remained the stalwart of the Blitz and Operation Diver. Veterans remembered firing through the night while London burned. They remembered the V1 campaign when shell bursts filled the sky and flying bombs fell into the channel. Those memories were proud and justified. But another memory lingered among those who served in North Africa. They remembered watching German 88s destroy British tanks from ranges where return fire was impossible. They remembered being told their own 3.7-inch guns could not engage ground targets. They remembered the orders that kept capable weapons pointing at empty sky while battles raged below. Technical studies confirmed the parallels. Both weapons used similar metallurgy. Both achieved similar ballistics. Both could destroy heavy armor at long range. The German gun's advantage came from training, doctrine, and organizational culture, not superior engineering. One retired Royal Artillery officer wrote in a 1962 memoir, "We had the gun. We had the shells. We had the crews. What we lacked was permission." The sentiment was widely shared among veterans who had served in both air defense and anti-tank units. They knew what the weapon could do. They knew why it had not been done. The statistical record supported their frustration. War Office Casualty Correlation Studies, reference W162/902, estimated that had British doctrine mirrored German flexibility, losses in 1941 and 1942 could have been reduced by up to 30%. The figure was speculative but based on careful analysis of engagement records. Tanks lost to long-range 88mm fire could have been saved by equivalent British fire. Infantry casualties from unsuppressed German armor could have been prevented. The counter-argument was equally valid. The 3.7 inches success in air defense was unquestionable. It defended Britain during the Blitz. It protected Mediterranean convoys. It stopped the V1 offensive. Its contribution to victory was enormous. Diverting resources to anti-tank employment might have weakened air defense unacceptably. The debate continued for decades. What is clear? Technology alone determines nothing. Doctrine and training unlock technology or suppress it. The same metal, machined to the same tolerances, firing projectiles at the same velocity, can become legendary or forgotten depending on how institutions choose to employ it. Expectation: technology determines outcomes. Reality: doctrine and training unlock technology or suppress it. Cause and effect: the policy wall built in 1940 to 1941 never truly came down. Closing archival anchor: anti-aircraft guns proved the most effective defense in the later stages of the V1 campaign, rising from early lows to approximately 74% weekly effectiveness and 82% on peak days. This statistical epitaph summarizes a weapon that saved cities but rarely fought tanks. The record shows a weapon that could have been two things at once, yet was required to be only one. The historical impact endures. The QF 3.7-inch delivered Britain's heaviest and most sustained heavy AA performance of the war. In North Africa and the Mediterranean, it occasionally served in ground roles but never doctrinally as a tank killer. The 17-pounder filled that role by design. The divergence with Germany's Flak 88 lies in doctrine and employment, not basic ballistic potential. Final thought from history. The record shows a weapon that could have been two things at once. Policy required it to be only one. The same engineering that defended London could have shattered panzers. The same precision that downed bombers could have stopped tanks. Britain's forgotten 88 was never actually forgotten. It was simply never allowed to show its full capability. If you value fact-based history grounded in primary sources and official reports, consider subscribing to keep these stories alive. What is your perspective on this part of history? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every memory and reflection helps keep the past alive.